Have you ever wanted to draw a spiral and then you see that, hey, there's a tool for that, awesome. But then you realize that that tool isn't actually all that helpful. Yes, it can draw you a spiral, but only this one type of spiral. What if you wanted a spiral that was even? What if you wanted one that was at an angle, something completely different? What do you do then? Well, you're in luck because that is exactly what we're looking at today. My name is Matt. You're watching the Visualize Designs channel. Let's get started. So a really quick way of making an even spiral is to go and pick up your polar grid tool here. And then if we double click, we just need to pick the right number of concentric dividers and radial dividers. The radial dividers, we don't want any of those. And we want double the amount of concentric that we want turns in our spiral. So 10 will give us 5. So if we go ahead and drag this out right here, we can pick out the top anchor points like this, cut them with Control X, paste them with Control F, and move them over once. And then we go down here and ungroup twice. We can pick every other of these lines and delete them. And then if we select everything, Control J to join, now we have an even spiral. Perfect. Except this isn't 100% accurate. You could probably tell that there is a little bit of weirdness going on in the center here. It's not looking exactly like that hypnotic spiral that we're used to. This has a little bit more of a cinnamon bun feel. So if you want that slightly more curved appearance here in the center, but how do we do that? Well, that's about what I'm about to show you. So first we want to go ahead and pick up the line segment tool here and just make whatever diagonal line, sort of like that. And then we want to bring out our rulers with Control R and drag down a guide to the top anchor point here, because that helps us to make a duplicate that starts at the exact height as the other path here ended. So now we can use Control D to repeat that action or repeat that transform to get 5 of them, to get our 5 spirals or 5 revolutions in the spiral. And at this point, we just want to thicken up the stroke a little bit because that can save us some hassle going down the line. And then we want to make this into a symbol. So go to the symbols window. If you don't have that open, you can go here, pick out symbols, and then just drag it in. Name doesn't matter, static symbol is fine. Let's pull that down here. So what we want to do next is to pick our pen tool and make sort of a 7 shape like this. And then we want to make sure that it has a fill and not a stroke. After that, we'll go to Effect, 3D and Materials, and then specifically pick the 3D Classic type of the revolve action here. And what you can see here is that this gives us this cone shape. And this we can use if we click on the map art, because now we're getting this rectangle that is, if you imagine that you cut up this cone and then lay it out flat, that is what we see here on this rectangle. So that means that we can go ahead and pick up our symbol, and if we scale that to fit, it will stretch over or stretch around the cone. And if we hide the geometry here, you can see that this gives us this spiral shape. Great. The only thing we need to be aware of here is that you can maybe see that there's a little bit of a gap right here, and that is where the seam is basically. And you can also see, because we've stretched the lines here a little bit, they ended sort of like an angle, so they maybe touch right at this point, but we want them to overlap properly so that we get a continuous spiral. We just need to drag this out a little bit to roughly where the slant starts, and we want to do this in both ends, sort of like that. And now you can see that that gap has disappeared. So pressing OK and then going to the top view here gives us this nice even spiral that we're looking for. At this point, we want to make a duplicate of this and drag it to the side, just in case we want to make some changes in the future, then we don't have to go all the way back. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit because it looks like these might be a little bit divided. We'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, in order to get from here to here, basically, this is a path. This is, well, a 7 with an effect onto it. We need to first expand that shape, or expand the appearance rather. So let's go to Object, Expand Appearance, and then to the properties, we can release this clipping mask and then ungroup twice in order to get to this clipping mask, which we don't need, so we'll just delete it. And it looks like these gaps that I saw before are no longer there. Maybe, let's see. Because at this point, this is a group, it's not actually a continuous shape. So if you ungroup that, you'll see that we have segments here at the seam. They don't actually connect, they just look like they do. So to make sure that this is one big object, we'll select everything and then to go to the Pathfinder and click Unite. And hopefully this has now created one big shape. Yes. No. Let's ungroup that. Is it one shape? It looks like it. Yeah, okay. Sometimes it doesn't connect perfectly, and then you just have to go in and manipulate the anchor points just ever so slightly, bring them down a little bit, something like that. And that will fix the issue if you go ahead and reunite. But this looks like it worked perfectly. So now we need to get this to a stroke, or rather 2 strokes actually, rather than having this filled shape. But before we get to that, we want to fix the shape just a little bit, because you can see here at the seam, we have a little bit of an overhang. And depending on how far you're viewing it away from, if that was a sentence, you can see that it doesn't really matter. It's very, very slight. So if you're fine with this, you can just leave it as is. But if you want to be a little bit more accurate, we can go in and fix this by averaging the position of these 2 anchor points out. And we do that by selecting both of them, going to Object, Path, Average. And we want that in both directions. There we go. So see, now they have moved on top of each other, giving us a nice smooth line. And this we just need to do for all of these seams. And the hotkey for the average command is Control-Alt-J. That speeds things up just a little bit. So this you just want to go down the line do for all of them. There we go. Now that we've fixed the shape, we can go ahead and make this into 2 paths, which we do by cutting open the end here. So with the scissor tool, C to activate that, cut a hole in the path, select these 2 anchor points that we have made, and delete them. And then we can go ahead and swap the fill and the stroke to actually see that we now have an open path here. Right, we just need to go ahead and do that again here. Select these 2 and delete. Perfect. So again, at this point, you can just pick out one of these paths and say, yay, I have my even spiral. Then you can skip the next step. But again, we want to be a little bit more accurate. Technically, what we want is not either of these, because this is the inside and the outside. It's sort of the offset of what the actual spiral that we want is. The actual spiral that we want is the one that runs perfectly in between these 2. It's maybe a little bit difficult to see, but you can also see that there is a little bit of a thickness variation going through here. So here it's a little bit thicker compared to here where it's a little bit thinner. So that obviously impacts the shape of it. So if we want to be accurate about it, we want the line that runs in between these 2. And we can get that pretty easily by using the blend tool here. So if you go ahead and pick one and then pick the other, you can see that that doesn't work at all. And that is because, well, it's not always that this happens, but sometimes it does, depending on how far these 2 lines are away from each other. because that will influence where the bends in the actual shape are. You can see here that the outer one here bends at this point, where the inside bends at this point. And because the blend tool is looking at the anchor points to try and figure out what the shape that goes in between these two lines is, it's getting a little bit confused. So we can fix it by adding some more anchor points to make sure that each of these has a partner on the opposite path. So let's go ahead and do that here with the pen tool, P. We'll go ahead and put down an anchor point that is roughly directly across, going from a line from the center, sort of. So there's one here. It's a good idea to make a little bit of a mental note where you saw the anchor points, so you don't have to swap back and forth between your selection tools, or the pen tool and the selection tool. You can just sort of scout it out. There's the anchor point. But yeah, then you just need to go around and do that, making sure that every point has a partner. Okay, so now that that is done, we can go ahead and blend, except there are still some points that are a little bit weird. And you can see that maybe it works a little bit better this time around. It works perfectly, actually. Sometimes it varies a little bit how iffy it is. It could have been that this point right here was an issue, because technically it doesn't have a partner, and we also have one here that doesn't have a partner. But yeah, the blend tool is a little bit of a fickle beast sometimes. Had that been an issue, I would just have added another one here and then probably just deleted that last one here. But it turns out that we have our very nice spiral here. So if we just go to Object and then expand that, we can pick out the midline as soon as we have ungrouped everything, of course. And there is our perfect spiral. There we go. Great. So now if we go ahead and rotate this around, we can compare with the other method. And it should be fairly obvious that there is a large difference between the centers of these two. So what we can also do with this method, because I was teasing that you'd be able to make any type of spiral basically, and you can do that specifically because this 3D effect allows us to turn it at an angle. So you could put it some like this, make it sort of uneven. And in true TV chef fashion, I have one here that I have already semi-prepped at this point. So just going in and doing the exact same thing as we have already done, making sure that you have the correct spiral line here. You can go in and add whatever effect you want to this stroke. And this is a shape that would have been really difficult to make accurately with any other method, basically. And that is all there is to it. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more content tailored towards scientists. And if you're currently working on your PhD, you should definitely go check out our certified PhD courses at visualizescience.com, where we teach you to present your research in the best way possible. Whether you're about to defend your thesis, or you need a poster for an upcoming conference, or you need a journal cover for an article submission, we can help you do all of that while you earn credits towards your degree. So click the link in the description and let us help you visualize your science.